Boyle Sports. Don't just bet, choose wisely.
Hello and welcome back to On The Wire, brought to you by Boyle Sports as another big festival preview as we tackle the Punchestown Festival, one of the great weeks of Irish racing. And we've got a fantastic panel to bring you through all the big Grade 1 action. But before we get stuck into the Punchestown preview, I'd like to remind you that you can get some fantastic offers from Boyle Sports, no more so than betting €10 to get €70 worth of free bets. You only have to scan the QR code on screen at the moment or click the link in the description down below to get involved with a fantastic Boyle Sports offer. Bet 10 to get 70. Yes, delighted to be joined by another super panel for the Punchestown preview for On The Wire this year. We've got Dan Overall, Donn McClean and Mark Boylan joining me to look at a couple of the Grade 1s from earlier part of the week and then a few best bets in our 60-second selections at the back end. Hope you're all well, gents. I'd love to give it all the pleasantries, but we've got plenty of races to get stuck into. So we're going to start off on Tuesday, the 2-mile Grade 1 novice hurdle. We see Kopek de Boord here, the Supreme Novices winner against Salvatore Mundi, who won the Top Novices hurdle at Aintree. They both did run against each other in the Supreme, but Mark, there's probably a fair amount of reason to suggest that Salvatore Mundi can get a lot closer to Kopek de Boord. Not saying he can maybe reverse that form, but he was pretty good at Aintree.
Yeah, you're reading my notes, Andrew, as well, and that I think the hood didn't seem to help him. They felt at Cheltenham he didn't travel in it and took it off him at Aintree, and you saw a very different horse. I think ground as well, there's been a big shift in the picture with what we've been looking at for Punchestown. Last week, there was potential for soft ground, lots of rain forecast, not a lot of it materialised, and they even had to accelerate the process of watering to an earlier stage now. And I think all that does help a horse like Salvatore Mundi, who to me is kind of all gears, travels well, you know, he has had tongue tie fitted, looks like he's had wind issues in some shape or form, I'd imagine, judged on that. And then you look at Kopek de Boord, who is in the other opposite end of the spectrum, has been very, very effective on softer ground. Now, listen, Cheltenham was still good to soft. It wasn't bad ground at all, but he's a horse who clearly can cope with it, much more testing than that. So I think if it is a set of circumstances where you try and catch Kopek de Boord on the hop, it could be here. But I just think Kopek de Boord is a superior horse. Price related for me here, I'd be looking and thinking, 2 to 5 type territory for Kopek de Boord. It is tight. I nearly look at the rest of the field and think Salvatore Mundi, he's 4 to 7 without Kopek de Boord. To me, that would nearly, if you're looking at short ones, maybe we're splitting hairs here. But if you're multiples, that would appeal to me more, thinking that Salvatore Mundi could put away the rest of the field. But I'd say they will get closer than Cheltenham. I don't think we saw the real Salvatore Mundi at Cheltenham, but Kopek de Boord, he looks a bit special, doesn't he?
Dan, the performance in the Supreme, and I suppose almost more visually, the performance in the Dublin Racing Festival was so impressive. I suppose, without wanting to be too snippy about Salvatore Mundi, I thought they went suicidal at Aintree in front, and it kind of fell in his lap. Would that be a little bit harsh on him?
Potentially so. I mean, I think he still, regardless of the early tempo, almost confirmed himself to be a horse that they always believed he was. See, there's talk going into the season, he was sort of meant to be the prodigal Supreme horse for many of the months. Then Kopek de Boord almost sprung, not out of nowhere. He was also highly touted, but Salvatore Mundi was held in the highest regards. And I think Aintree just confirmed what they'd seen all along in him. See, good ground seems important, hence why he also ran in the summer, obviously get that experience. I think it's tough to see him really reversing that form with Kopek de Boord. There are reasons to expect it. Obviously, Aintree was a step in the right direction. He reversed the form with Romeo Coolio there. I think, regardless of a Kopek still a bit green and raw, he still managed to win in the manner of a top-class horse in the making. I just do struggle. And for much of the ground he's drying out, he's probably going to be the softest on the opening day. Obviously, it's very much drying forecast thereafter. We may well be yielding territory on the opening day. I just think he's going to be very tough to beat. And just a note on this, because I think it's setting the week up in this vein. I think Matt Toombs, who would be a bit of a trends and stats man and does lots of racing TV. He did a tweet the other day about Grade 1 winners and trainer records since the turn of the century. So Willie Mullins, 112 Grade 1 winners since the turn of the century. Next best would be Jessica Harrington of 12, and her last one was in 2018. That's the level of superiority we're looking at here. Obviously, he dominates this. He'll be talking about many of his runners and the many races he dominates throughout the week. It's just a truly staggering era of domination for the man.
Yeah, very much so. However, Donn, I suppose if the Punchestown Festival has taught us anything over the last number of years, is that some of these races that we're going to look at throughout the entirety of the week, they look straightforward on paper. You have short-priced favourites that have won at Cheltenham, and they can get turned over. Do you think, is there any chink in Kopek de Boord here?
I think it's hard to find it, Andrew. Yeah, interesting point that Dan makes there on the Willie Mullins domination at Punchestown. And I think Tony Keenan had a piece in the Irish Field about how last year's role for the champion trainer title in Britain affected his Punchestown results, and it didn't really affect the Grade 1s, but maybe further down the pecking order outside of the Grade 1s, he wasn't as prolific in the non-Grade 1 races. But in Grade 1, I think he had 8 Grade 1 winners at Punchestown last year, down from 9 in each of the previous 3 seasons. So it hasn't had any impact in Grade 1 races. And yeah, Kopek de Boord, like, you know, we've spoken about him a couple of times during the season, Andrew, and he's deserved all the chat that he's got. Like what he did at Christmas was really, really phenomenal, given how poorly he jumped. And then there was always a chance that he'd step forward from that at Leopardstown and the Dublin Racing Festival if he jumped a bit better, which he did. And then Supreme Novices Hurdle, I just think this year's Supreme Novices Hurdle was a very, very good race with 3 very good horses finishing first, second, and third. The times, by comparison with the Champion Hurdle, it was faster, but it wasn't just faster because, you know, some kind of a pace anomaly. It was faster all the way through the race, and nearly every stage of the race was faster than the Champion Hurdle. I know the Champion Hurdle this year was a little bit analytic itself, but I think Kopek de Boord was just a very, very good horse. William Money, the runner-up, is a very good horse as well. And Salvatore Mundi was in that race, obviously. As the lads were saying, he reversed. He stepped forward a lot from that at entry the last time. He reversed places with Romeo Coolio. I don't think it was necessarily a pace collapse at entry, Andrew. I think the finishing speed percent was 103%. They did go fast, but I don't think he was the beneficiary of a pace collapse. I think he's well suited to coming off a fast pace, which he didn't get in the Moscow Flyer Hurdle, when again he did well to win, given that he did so much wrong. And, you know, there was a kind of a split school of thought going into Cheltenham, whether, you know, if he did that again, he wouldn't have a chance in Supreme Novices. But the fact that he did that and was able to win despite doing so much wrong, that was a positive. But then I think at entry, he put that all to rest. He's just a really good horse. No hood on, as I think Mark was saying earlier on, and no hood again tomorrow. So he's a worthy challenger to Kopek de Boord, but I just think Kopek de Boord he could be anything. Like he's got that aura about him that wherever he goes next season, all going well, he could be a top class novice chaser and then go on from there. Or if he stays over hurdles, he could reach the very top over hurdles. But I'm looking forward to seeing him. It's a no bet race for me, as Mark was saying. I think Kopek de Boord is a fair bit in front of Salvatore Mundi, who is a fair bit in front of the rest. So it's a race to watch and see Kopek de Boord again, but I'm looking forward to seeing him again, and looking further ahead and looking forward to seeing what he might do in the future as well.
Yeah, very much so. Should be an informative Grade 1 to say the least. The next Grade 1 on the Tuesday at the Dooley Insurance Group, Champion Novice Chase, often an excellent race as well. And this looks a good field. 3 at the top for Willie Mullins, Ballyburn, Lecky Watson, Imperi Pass, Stellar Story and Gorgeous Tom, who ran in the Brown Advisory as well. Slade Steel, potentially the Forgotten Horse. This is a very decent race, and it wouldn't be an On the Wire without our weekly Mark Boylan Ballyburn update. So, Mark, what side of the fence are we this time?
This is really like an ongoing saga. Last week at Farias, she surely would have won that, you'd imagine, the way the race materialised, but it's a different type of field here. And I can't get it out of my head fully, Andrew, just that performance last year, Punchestown, beating Jatara, having been so impressive at Cheltenham. I don't think he backed up to the same level here. And it was a very different type of performance in Cheltenham this year. We've spoken about in the past, his jumping just went to pieces, and probably did well to finish where he did, given how badly he jumped. But just something I have in my mind for Punchestown in general, with kind of sharp price ones in Grade 1s. I think in the last 5 years, looking at this coming in this morning, or the last 4 Punchestown festivals, 20 out of 28 horses at evens or shorter of won, 71% strike rate. But the pinch point, I suppose, with some of those shorter ones getting beaten tends to be over fences and over further. Even if you stretch it out and look at kind of the last 12 years, there's been 6 odds on shots in grade 1 chases over 3 miles or further. Only one of them won, Size and John. You can just sometimes that category where, especially where a season hasn't gone fully to plan for Ballyburn, he's had in out type of season. I still think he's the best of these, absolutely the best of these, but I just want to be getting rewarded with value if I was going to stand in. And wasn't a play that I thought I'd be with, but I think Imperial Pass is the horse at a price that just looks even each way value. Like, I think 11-2 looks very, very big. And I think we saw at the Dublin Racing Festival, Ballyburn is ahead of him, but it's just whether you're guaranteed to see peak Ballyburn. I think with Imperial Pass, he showed as well being an Aintree. He's going to like decent ground at the back of what he showed there. And what I liked about the Aintree day was as well, they were very, very strong on him in the market, that he was back. Whereas at the Dublin Racing Festival, he was a little bit iffy in the morning, easy enough. If Imperial Pass, I think you're going to need another improvement again to beat a Ballyburn, but just who's to say that we'll see peak Ballyburn here? It's not a race that I'm jumping up and down to how I bet in, but I just thought at the prices 11-2 kind of Imperial Pass, that looked just a bit too big.
Yeah, I can certainly see the case with that, Donn. Like, looking at Imperial Pass even last season, his hurdles campaign didn't really ignite until winning the Aintree hurdle, and then he backed it up at Sandown that time round. He comes to Punchestown here, similar enough, where he obviously won a grade 1 at Christmas time, disappointed the DRF, but he looked a completely rejuvenated character at Aintree and was very impressive.
Yeah, he was. I quite like him, Andrew, here. I think he's a fair bit too big. I thought he would have been a lot shorter than he is. Look, as you say, he was a classy hurdler. Like, he knocked heads against State Man through the early part of that of his hurdling campaign, his kind of championship hurdling campaign, and that wasn't ideal. Then he bounced back and won that that brilliant Aintree hurdle on his second last run. And look, he's stepping up in trip here to 3 miles in a furlong, but like Punchestown, it's a speed favouring track. So if you're going to step up in trip, Punchestown's a good track at which to do it. Plus, he won the select hurdle at Sandown last season over 2 miles, 5.5 furlongs. So, and he stays 2.5 miles. Well, we know that. I think it's interesting that he is stepping up in trip, and he did have other options, obviously, at Punchestown. Willie Mullins also obviously has Ballyburn and Lecky Watson in here. So it's interesting that he's sending Imperial Pass in here as well. And like at Aintree the last day, he was very, very good. He won by just over a length in the end from Gidley Park, but he left the impression he won with way more in hand than that. And the race IQ information is interesting here. They reckon his final 4 furlongs was the fastest final 4 furlongs of any chaser at the Aintree Grand National Meeting. So to me, that's significant. Plus, he seemed to do it easily enough with a little bit in hand. And it seems like he's been around for quite a while, but he's only 7th. He's only run 4 times over fences, so he still has plenty of potential to improve again over fences. He goes well at Punchestown as well. He's run there twice. He's won there twice. And look, it's a quick enough turnaround after entry, but it's 3.5 weeks, so it's not that quick. He goes well on the ground as well. And yeah, I think he's got an awful lot in his favour. On Ballyburn, Mark kind of covered him. He's always short. I think he's short again here. Lecky Watson is just a hugely likable horse. He's such a, he's a horse who doesn't really get the recognition that he's due. And he won well at Cheltenham in the Brand Advisory Chase. I think the less stern stamina test at Punchestown will not be a positive for Lecky Watson. I think he's a real stamina horse. And look, he has won at Punchestown, but he's been well beaten at this meeting in each of the last 2 seasons. So I think he's not, he's vulnerable as well. And I thought Imperial Pass should have been a fair bit shorter than he is, or than he's been put in. And I can see him going off shorter in the day as well.
Yeah, strong case by Donn there for Imperial Pass to back up Mark. Dan, it's interesting, Donn was mentioning Lecky Watson there. Are we, it can happen quite a lot in racing where we tend to snuff our nose at who actually wins races, and we look at hype and we look at horses that are perhaps well touted. Lecky Watson did absolutely nothing wrong in the Brown Advisory. He won it very comfortably. Is that a situation where actually he might be the best of these, or will you need to see it backed up?
I think I'd like to see it one more time. Completely understand why he's towards the head of the betting, obviously, after winning last time out. Unexpectedly so, went off 20-1 for that. Did nothing wrong, as you said, was well positioned, capitalised on what was a very disappointing Ballyburn performance, and one I can't readily forgive, given at the DRF he was almost seemingly a bit reformed. He jumped better, he seemed to settle better, and the Cheltenham Festival, it all went out the window, head on the floor, made numerous errors, and was back to the horse we feared he might be. So I can't really see Ballyburn at that kind of price. He wouldn't be for me. I thought in a race that does have each way appeal, I thought Stellar Story was potentially the overpriced one. Now, often you get to the end of the season here, and obviously Gordon Elliott generally start them a bit earlier, tend to feel they've probably had their best days by this stage. But I don't think that's the case with Stellar Story. Only made his chase debut towards the end of November, which would be late enough relative to some of Gordon Elliott's normal novice chasers. And ever since his jumping fell apart at Christmas, you just feel they've just been nursing him back from that. Obviously, his run behind Better Days Ahead was a massive eye catcher when clearly he was just there to have a good round and hopefully a good experience moving forward. Really good run at Cheltenham again, where jumping was better, a couple of mistakes, but nothing too drastic. Slowly run race, I don't think played to his strengths and where he was positioned throughout the race, but stayed on into second. Plenty of pace angles in this race as well, which I do think will make it a relative stamina test. You've got Don't Not Rightly Know, who I'm surprised is here, but Champ Kylie as well. Lecky Watson, you imagine, will be forward. Stellar Story, we know, a dour stayer, only had 4 runs. I think that run last time out was another step in the right direction. I think he's still capable of better, and I was surprised he was as big around 12-1, and not often the case at races at Punchestown or indeed many Grade 1s, you're actually able to get each-way terms, but I thought he made some decent each-way appeal.
The third and final Grade 1 on the Tuesday is the William Hill Champion Chase. And this race has massively benefited from the fact that Factor File is dropping down in trip from the Ryanair. He's currently your favourite alongside Marine Nationale. Very impressive in the Champion Chase itself. Solness is in there. Captain Guinness, a previous winner of the Champion Chase. El Fabiolo and Sinicia are your 6. This is a really, really good race, Mark. Do you fancy the fact that Factor File probably put in the performance at Cheltenham and can back it up down in trip? Or are we sleeping on the fact that there's a 17-length winner of the Champion Chase that's double the price?
One of us isn't sleeping on it anyway. I know you never would. But yeah, look, I kind of have it in my head with this race as well. You know, ground is going to play a part here. If Factor File was coming back to 2 miles and was getting a splash of rain and it was slower, I think that'd be really in his favour. But I think the market is underestimating Marine Nationale. I'm not just saying that because you're here. I genuinely think on the ground and with the bit of pace he has, like Willie Mullins has come back from a Ryanair chase with the likes of an Allaho, and it hasn't exactly worked here. He ran well, but he was beaten by Shaq and Persois a few seasons ago. Okay, different type of horses, but both horses that could be capable of 3 miles as well. You know, Allaho, Punchestown Gold Cup winner. Factor File is not slow, absolutely. But it's a big performance at Cheltenham, and just I felt the way the Champion Chase unfolded. It's not a vintage race the way it happened, but it was the final part of the race from Marine Nationale that would have powered away on decent ground. I could just see Solness going a good lick here again. And if it did put Factor Files jumping under pressure at all at 2 miles on ground that's maybe, if you were stepping down, prefer softer, just 10-11 and 9-4. It's a fair discrepancy, but when you know one horse will absolutely relish that. Factor Files didn't turn up at the end of last season either. They sent him out for his break afterwards. So this is something new for him as well. Obviously, Marine Nationale missed the second half of last season, so we're in a little bit of unknown territory. But just purely on a price bait, they're both 8-year-olds as well. I know they have different types of profiles, but yeah, I just think Marine Nationale, I didn't feel coming out of Cheltenham that it would be odds on that I'd be back tipping him in a race like this, and then you throw Factor File in the mix. But just a price related thing, Andrew. I think he's a bit of value there as it stands.
Yeah, I can see that obviously with Marine. Donn, like I think when it comes down to it, Factor File's probably got the more ability of the two. However, he hasn't ran over 2 miles since finishing second in the Champion Bumper over 2 years ago. It's a big ask. I know he was so impressive at Cheltenham. You are going to have to take a pretty skimpy price about a horse. And we've seen Mullins horses in the past, as Mark's alluded to, get beaten this race with similar enough profiles.
Yeah, I can see all of that, Andrew. And look, Factor File, he was seriously impressive winning the Ryanair chase. He was one of the most impressive winners at the Cheltenham Festival, if not the most impressive winner. And he's a huge talent, but I think you've hit the nail on the head. Like his last run over 2 miles was in the Champion Bumper. He won the 2.5 mile bumper at Leopardstown over Christmas that season. And that's a race that is always a kind of, it's a stamina race. It's a race that horses go on, and obviously they go further than 2.5 miles. And like in the early part of the season, he was running in the Savills Chase and the Irish Gold Cup, dropped down and tripped for the Ryanair and was brilliant there. But this is another step down and back at Punchestown on ground that's, you know, it's going to be safe ground, but it's not soft ground. So it's going to be a speed test more than a stamina test. And Factor File, as Mark was saying, he's not lacking pace, But it's a real 2 mile at Punchestown on goodish ground or yielding ground test of speed. And you just think that Marine Nationale, I'd nearly have them the other way around in the betting. I know Factor File is £5 higher in terms of official ratings, but Marine Nationale, this is his discipline. He goes really well at Punchestown. He's only had 6 runs over fences. He won his bumper and he won his maiden hurdle here. And his performance in the Champion Chase was another step forward from his run at Leopardstown at the Dublin Racing Festival. And there's every chance he'll take a step forward again. He loved the ground. Barry Connell's been very positive about him all week. And yeah, I can see him really putting it up to Factor File and maybe even beating him. I think Solness is the value of the race, though. I think he's way too big a price. Like he those 2 runs at Leopardstown, I'm not sure he fully got the credit. Definitely didn't get the credit for the first of them in the fog. Not sure he got the credit for the second of them either. And at Cheltenham last time, he's got 20 lengths to find in Marine Nationale, obviously from there, but just things didn't go right. It was a standing start. He didn't get away quickly. It seemed to take him a long time to get into his rhythm. He didn't go to the front until after the 5th fence, and he'd done so much running to get there. Then he just kind of faded after a couple of fences later. But I think at Punchestown, this should suit him. His only real potential competition for the lead is with Synesia, and you just hope that he'll be going fast enough within his comfort zone to lead and to get an easy enough lead, you'd hope. And if he can settle into the rhythm that he settled into at Leopardstown, he's a very, very good horse. I know he's more exposed than some of his rivals, but he's still only a 7-year-old. And the goodish ground at Punchestown, the pace test that this race is going to be, that should suit Solness. And I can see him getting close enough to the top 2 in the market.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, Dan, looking at this race, just how quick they go, I suppose, is the thing with Solness, because you do have Synesia in there, who's a big old price, but made all in the Webster Cup the last day under Phil Enright. So there's going to be pressure. You wouldn't think Factor File they'll be messing around with him either. So it's a case where potentially the stronger they go, it could suit Factor File because it brings in stamina. It could also suit the fact that Marine Nationale probably won't play any part in that and can sit off 2 or 3 horses that might go a little bit too quick.
Yeah, this will be properly run. There's no doubt about that. See, Solness really didn't get into the Champion Chase. The start kind of blew it for him. Eventually got to lead, but it was kind of case over by then. And I think this is a really interesting case where I think you look at the race IQ data for a race like this, and the question is Factor File naturally quick enough for a 2 mile championship race? And obviously, until you're in one, hard to really prove either way. But you look at the way that Ryanair panned out, the first mile of that, they went relentlessly quick. Jungle Boogie out in front, took on Ile Francais. And the fact that Ile Francais wasn't in front, that alone tells you how quick it was. But the early sectionals in the Ryanair were quicker than the Champion Chase. Now, different day, different track, obviously new versus old. So slight caveats with that. But to me, Factor File looked all pace there to a certain extent. I don't think that's a horse you really... I know he's been running over 3 miles, but that didn't scream former 3 miler to me. And interestingly, some of his late sectionals as well, despite not really being asked to do all that much, were quicker than what Marine ever went during the Champion Chase. I think as they were coming down the hill in the Ryanair, his 3 consecutive furlongs, 12.96 seconds, 13.46 seconds, 13.25 seconds. 2 of those quicker than Marine's quickest furlong in the Champion Chase. So Factor File demonstrated plenty of pace to me. Now, can he maintain that in a 2 mile environment, especially if there's an electric pace? Not so sure. But he's shown the gears, in my opinion, to suggest that he can handle 2 miles. The price is short enough now. Now, it's not a betting race for me, but I do think he'll handle it. I think the stronger the pace, if he can just get into a rhythm early on, I do think he's the one to beat. Yeah,
cracking race, the Champion Chase, which concludes the Grade 1 action on the Tuesday. Our partners, Boyle Sports, have some super offers that you can avail of, one of which being you can get money back as a free bet if second to the SP FAF throughout the entirety of the Punchestown Festival. Make sure to click the link in the description below to avail of the offer. We will move over to the Grade 1 action on Wednesday, which starts off with the Shannon Real Estate Group Novice Hurdle, the 3 mile Grade 1. Plenty of horses that have ran in the Albert Bartlett here. Jasmine DeVoe, the winner of the Bartlett, running against Honesty Policy, who won the Mersey for Gordon Elliott at Aintree. I must say, out of all the horses that were relatively well fancied at Cheltenham, Jasmine DeVoe would have been the one I'd have never, ever backed in a month of Sundays. But that's why we paid Donn McClean the big bucks, because he told us that the horse would win, and he did win quite impressively. Can he back this up, Donn? And do you think, probably based off that Cheltenham run, that we are beginning to see improvement in his jumping, which has been slow to come to hand, to say the least?
Yeah, look, he did well at Cheltenham, Andrew. He was very good. Paul Townend gave him a super ride. He was way back early on. Even at the third last, he was nearly last. And Paul Townend didn't panic. As we know, there are only 2 flights of hurdles in the last 7 furlongs in the new course at Cheltenham, and that probably suited him. He came wide into the home straight. Maybe he was helped by a little bit of trouble on the inside that the big Westerner ran into when Wingman made a mistake at the second last. That wasn't ideal for her, but I think he was probably the best horse in the race on the day anyway. And he won well. And look, he sets the standard here. I think he's towards the head of the market, if not at the top of the market. I haven't seen any betting on this yet since declarations, but I'm sure he's going to be favoured, and he deserves to be favoured back over 3 miles. And I think his jumping is getting better. I think his jumping at Cheltenham was probably as good as it's ever been, and it's a factor. It's a big factor, and it's going to be a factor in whatever he does in the future as well. But he seems to be getting better, all right. And you know, it's the old kind of adage in this race where you have the Albert Bartlett hurdle horses, and then the other horses have come different routes. Like Honesty Policy was very good at Aintree. That was over 2.5 miles stepping up in trip. Card Canter, he's like Gordon Elliott's horse as well. That he trains the 2 of them, Honesty Policy and Card Canter, and he's been progressing kind of way below the radar. He only won his maiden there in February, and then went to Navan and won well there as well. So he's a horse who can come forward again. And Argento Boy, interesting, with cheek pieces on for the first time. So I think it's a really interesting race, but Jasmine DeVoe at the top of the market, I can't argue with that. I think he's the most talented horse in the race, for all that some of the others have the potential to progress and get up to his level, but I think he sets the standard all right.
Yeah, he certainly does. Dan, like as Donn mentioned there, Card Counter and Honesty Policy are, 2 that certainly stick out from Gordon Elliott's. Jarive to me hasn't really been tested, I suppose, at this type of level, but has been very impressive in small fields, smaller events. In England, he's been one of these horses that Willie Mullins has kind of plotted at the Catricks and Haydocks of the world. Is this a betting race because Jasmine DeVoe potentially still has the odd chink in his armour?
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to get prices first. I think the sudden emission of Final Demand obviously caught, I think, a few people by surprise. He was the anti-post leader for this. Looks like he's going to go the 2.5 mile route, despite clearly being a 3 mile horse. They're persisting with the intermediate trips for him for now, it would seem. I think it would eventually probably become a betting race, given the 8 runners and given the each-way alternatives that will be available to Jasmine DeVoe, despite the fact that Willie Mullins and Paul Townend have won this race the past 4 years, relatively short prices. Jasmine DeVoe still can't jump that well. You look at the race IQ data, he lost lengths at every single hurdle bar the last 2. And by then, in the Albert Bartlett, as you know, that data is skewed somewhat by horses going back through the field and fading. So his lengths gained actually are enhanced by the fact that other rivals are just fading out of it. Before that, still very much the same old Jasmine DeVoe. And so a more sterner test of jumping, I still think is going to inconvenience him. Clearly, there's a tremendous engine there to overcome all of those foibles to win the Albert Bartlett in such style. Is the Albert Bartlett form that robust? Obviously, the Big Westerner was the eye-catcher, disappointed recently. I think you can forgive that, but tends to not exactly be the standout novice hurdle coming away from Cheltenham. I think that'll be very much the case again this year. And as you say, again, a bit of a juxtaposition, really, with Gordon Elliott having sort of the improving runners with less experience. It's normally the other way around. By this time of the season, they've had their runs, they've had the experience. Is there much improvement to come? But in Honesty Policy and Card Counter, they both ran in point to points, but this is their first season on the rules. They seem to be the one with the scope to improve. I do think there'll be an each-way angle into this race, with Jasmine DeVoe likely to be quite a short price.
Mark, I was doing a little bit of work with Ruby Walsh earlier on this week, looking ahead to Punchestown. And it was interesting. He thought that Jasmine DeVoe was a real archetypical stairs hurdle horse. He kind of gave him a little bit of a reminder, a big Bucksy, that his jumping at the start wasn't overly perfect, but he's got the engine, he's a behind the bridle horse. And obviously that new track at Cheltenham suits that type of horse. With Punchestown, it's a little bit sharper, and there is that more emphasis in the latter stages of the race on jumping. Could that be his undoing?
Yeah, it's a fair point to make about the stairs hurdle thing. Imagine the way he started off life over hurdles that respect an offence at the first attempt. That could be you don't want to be checking your insurance policy the first day you go to ride in, possibly. But I actually think that I like the way Honesty Policy has come along, and I have in my head as well with this, that Jasmine DeVoe last season, his performance here in the Champion Bumper, having won the Champion Bumper in Cheltenham, was a very big disappointment. And there's been as many Albert Bartlett winners beaten in this as won it in the last 10 years. You look at Penn Hill turned over here. Vanillier was very disappointing. There's other examples there of horses that have come here and haven't backed it up. Some have won. But just a horse that showed you last year that he did that. You mentioned the jumping question marks about him at times. He does have a bit of class about him. There's no question. Maybe more class than an Honesty Policy. But when we get up and trip into 3 Mile territory, I just really like what I've seen from this guy last time in Aintree. It was a super ride for Mark Walsh, waited. But I think there's a lot more in his locker. And, Jukebox Jury, a horse that typically it seems at the minute, a lot of the progeny are very tough horses, good attitudes, and you get down to a fight. And, Jasmine DeVoe want to do things right, I think, to beat this guy. It's obviously a little query turning out as quick as he is, Honesty Policy, from Aintree. But as Don touched on earlier, the gap between Aintree and Cheltenham this year, it does give a little opportunity now, because that was tighter. It gives a little opportunity for the Punchestown horses now. He wasn't in Cheltenham. Gordon Elliott maybe doesn't have a huge grade 1 team coming here this week, but Jasmine DeVoe, for all that he has the ability, he just needs to go and prove that hasn't left a mark either. The big Westerner disappointed, obviously, having run really well against him, then disappointed at Fairyhouse. That's another little crib you could pick at. Just when you look at the prices, I think early show I've seen, the first one is maybe even money 9-4. Yeah, I'd like Honesty Policy on those sort of terms anyway.
Moving on to the Grade 1 bumper, the race and stay at Punchestown Champion flat race. And we've got the Cheltenham bumper winner in this, Bambino Fever. Jody Townend keeps the ride, despite the fact Patrick Mullins would be able to ride based on the weight this time round. He rides Copacabana. We've got Col Cannon that won the DRF Geldings bumper for Noel Meade and Derek O'Connor, switch from Diesel. Look, we could go down a bit of a rabbit hole about this, Mark. There's a couple of horses running in this race that I've no idea.
Where's Redemption Day, no? He thought he was for this, yeah.
There's an argument that he's the only one missing out, because a few of these that have ran a number of times in bumpers, but Bambino Fever was really impressive in the Cheltenham bumper. Hard to know the real strength of the race. Obviously, the third Shuttle Diplomacy ran a poor enough race at Fairyhouse, but that was on tiring ground. But she's been just progressive and getting better and better. Won the Mayor's Race at the Dublin Racing Festival, and then won really without much issue at Cheltenham. It was a very, very straightforward watch if you'd backed her.
Yeah, smashing filly, and one that I probably didn't give full credit to early on in her career. But she's made great leaps at every start this season. And yeah, I earlier in the week she was 3-1, I think, when they initially priced this up, and I thought that was a lack of respect shown to her. What holes do you want to pick in her? Like, obviously, look, we've seen a couple of Champion Bumper winners get beaten here, but we've also seen, I think, 2 of the last 3 have come and won this. We've seen a couple of mares be able to come here and win this. Fiona won, and there sticks out in mind. Colreevy has won it in recent years. Willie Mullins' record in the race is outstanding. I don't see what there is to knock her hugely here. You're just basically banking on her not having left a big mark on herself at Cheltenham, but she's had a whole 7 weeks since then, and she's not like she had a very, very hard campaign through the year. She's bolted up at Punchestown, bolted up at the DRF, and switched from Diesel, even who was second to her at the DRF, has gone and shown that form was absolutely very, very respectable. Copacabana, I'm sure there is a big engine there. I'm sure he is a very good horse. I'm sure next season we'll see the best of him. But Navan, when he won, that was soft to heavy ground. Cheltenham was quicker. It's going to be dry enough ground here again. I just query whether you're going to see the very best of Copacabana in those conditions, for all that it's early and we're dealing with a small sample size. I just, Bambino Fever to me is, of the kind of Willie Mullins favourites this week, she's one that I thought when they first priced it up, she wasn't fully respected. And yeah, she's a proper one now. Loads of pace. And I know what you mean about the Shuttle Diplomacy form, but I wouldn't let that be the thing that slows you down with her. There's inevitably every year a Champion Bumper does throw up its fair share of winners. Yeah, certainly. And honestly, Don, looking at this race, I wasn't sure what you could really take her on with. It's either, a couple of horses that she's beaten already, and Col Cannon, I suppose, was very impressive in the Dublin Racing Festival Geldings bumper, and Sortudo has given that a bit of a boost, but it didn't look a brilliant race on paper at the time. And if I'm being honest, I thought the only horse that potentially could beat her is running in the Grade 3 bumper on the same day in Paddy Toomey's filly. But she gets she doesn't have to carry any penalty in that race, and therefore they've gone for the slightly easier option. Yeah, no, you can see why they've done that, and they're all right. It's kind of, I think was it a Grade 2 she won at Aintree, and she doesn't have to carry a penalty in a Grade 3 race. So yeah, you can understand why they're going there. You look,
all that Mark said about Bambino Fever, I agree with all of that. She's just rock solid. And even in the champion bumper at Cheltenham, like, she was well enough back in the field early on. They didn't go a great pace. Sean Bowen gave heads up a super ride in front and nearly got there on John McConnell's horse. But Bambino Fever, she was the one that came out of the pack and just stayed on well. And like Jodie Townend was really good in her. And it's great that she's keeping the ride as well, because they get on so well together. They won at the Dublin Racing Festival as well. And as you said, that like she had Calypso Chance behind her at Cheltenham. She had switched from Diesel behind her at Leopardstown. She had Copacabana behind her at Cheltenham as well. Calypso Chance, I suppose, on him, like, he was sent off as favourite for the champion bumper at Cheltenham on the back of his win at Navan when he had his stable companion Classical Creek behind him, and he reopposed as well now on Wednesday. So you can see him being a better horse than he was able to show at Cheltenham. And maybe all his really impressive form was on soft ground. Like, he beat Heads Up by probably more than Bambino Fever beat Heads Up by on his previous run at Navan. But maybe he's a horse who does want easy ground, while he won his point-to-point and officially good to soft ground. But I'm going to be interested to see him, Harry Swans on him, and Classical Creek as well. I remember before that Navan race, the kind of vibe was there wasn't much between Classical Creek and Calypso Chance. Now, Calypso Chance was really impressed with winning it, but Classical Creek, Gordon Elliott's horse as well, there could be a good horse in there, and we haven't seen him since then. That was back in December, so it's interesting that Gordon's persevered with him and he's taken his chance on here. But yeah, but like Kilcannon as well, like he didn't go to Cheltenham obviously, but he was good in winning the Grade 2 race, beating Sortudo there, and Sortudo finished 7th in the champion bumper, so he's got ground to make up on collateral lines of form with Bambino Fever. But as you said, Andrew, Sortudo was good at Ferryhouse. He was really impressive winning the bumper at Ferryhouse there last week. So I think it's an interesting race. From a betting perspective, though, it's very difficult to pick holes in Bambino Fever, as Mark was saying as well. There's a good correlation between the Cheltenham bumper and the Punchestown bumper. It's not like horses who win there bomb out here because for whatever reasons other horses improve around them. But I think it's, she gets the mare's allowance as well. It's very difficult to pick holes, I think.
Yeah, certainly. Dan, she was very impressive at Cheltenham. Jodie Townend seems to get a good tune out of her, and I, for one, I'm glad to see that obviously the owners and Willie Mullins have decided to stick with the winning formula and allow Jodie to keep the ride.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Jodie Townend. She's very capable, and she's proven time and time again that she is amongst one of the best amateurs in my opinion, and gave her a great ride at Cheltenham. Great to see that partnership retained, and Patrick did choose Copacabana going into the champion bumper, so I guess it makes sense really that he rides him here as well. Not too much to add there. The lads have covered it in great depth. Just on the initial opening prices, from what I've seen, looking around even money to 6-4 for Bambino Fever, which you could argue in a 7-runner race, given the authority of a champion bumper win. Still, I'm surprised maybe she isn't a shade of odds on myself, but classic kind of dilemma of bumper horses improving at different rates, as the guys have mentioned, various form lines intertwining here, that horses clearly improving at different rates. But from what we've seen of Bambino Fever thus far, from limited amount of starts, that she's been somewhat underestimated thus far, but I think she's now getting the respect she deserves and is a rightful favourite here.
Our sponsors, Boyle Sports, are always looking to make your experience as a customer better, and while doing so, they are offering best odds guaranteed on all singles and multiples for the Punchestown Festival. Make sure to click the link in the description to avail of best odds guaranteed. They've changed the scheduling slightly around at Punchestown this week, a little bit like they did at the Cheltenham Festival, to kind of build crescendo to the big Grade 1 on each day. And the big Grade 1 on the Wednesday is the Punchestown Gold Cup. Just the 4 runners, but 4 very, very good runners at that. Galopin Des Champs, the beaten Gold Cup favourite, is in there. Monty Starr is in there, who was 4th in the Gold Cup. Banbridge, the King George winner, and Spallan's Tower, a course and distance novice chase winner at this meeting last season. Dan, we'll come back to you. I suppose going into the race and throughout the year, I've been thinking potentially Spallan's Tower might be able to catch them on the hop here as maybe a little bit of a fresher horse. Seems to go well at the likes of Ferryhouse and Punchestown. However, the fact that it's only 4 runners, and I just don't see pace, are we just going to be in a situation where we get a Leopardstown-esque situation with Galopin Des Champs out in front, getting it relatively handy, and he is still the best horse in this race?
Well, I think that's almost certainly how it's going to play out. I'd say, from a tactical perspective, you can't really imagine the likes of Splans Tower or Banbridge going forward. That seems an impossibility. I guess maybe Monty Starr, if they want to make it a stamina test. He's a horse who needs as much of a test as possible, so he might need to make his own running, but hasn't really done that before. So the only real clear front runner in the past runnings is Galopin Des Champs, and he's proven very effective with those tactics. Obviously, drying ground are concerned. His form here is not necessarily at the levels we're used to seeing. The likes of Cheltenham and Leopardstown would be the concern. And maybe the small field tactical nature of this race and the lightly slow place will just play into Banbridge's hands. Now, obviously, a lot of people fancied him for the Gold Cup. Jumped pretty poorly that day, never really competitive. Bit disappointing all in all, considering there weren't many valid excuses for that. But it was only his first run since the King George, and he did disappoint in the Ryanair last season before bouncing back here to win the Champion Chase in a manner of a stayer, just denying Captain Guinness. He's still relatively unexposed at this kind of trip. And there is just that feeling that with the ground drying out, the small field tactical element, still relatively unexposed at this trip, and Galopin Des Champs not always been at his best here. And I don't know how hard a race he had in the Gold Cup, but it was definitely a more hard race than Banbridge had, given he was kind of out of contention early. Banbridge's conditions might well be spot on here.
Yeah, Don, I know you were a big fan of Banbridge for the King George, where he was very impressive. As Dan mentioned there, a relatively lifeless run in the Gold Cup without necessarily that many excuses. I suppose in the Ryanair the year before, the ground had gone for him. The ground should have been A1, and he just didn't seem to pick up the bridle at any stage.
Yeah, I was also one of those people to whom Dan was referring. I fancied him for the Gold Cup as well. And yeah, he just, for whatever reason, it wasn't his running. He didn't run his race, and there's no reason why he shouldn't have. It's not like he's not a Cheltenham horse. He's a Cheltenham Festival winner. He won the Martin Pipe Hurdle. He won the Arkle Trial as well. So you just have to allow him that. And at this meeting last year, he ran in the Champion Chase, and he just got up to get the better of Captain Guinness. So that, over 2 miles and half a furlong at Punchestown, it was, it's obviously shorter than ideal for him. So he did really well to win it. So I wouldn't give up on Banbridge. It's a pity there are only 4 runners, but they're 4 right horses, all right. And Monty Starr, progressive horse, still talented horse. He only has 3 parts of a length to find with Splans Tower on the running in the novices chase here last season. And the Galopin Des Champs is Galopin Des Champs. But I think Splans Tower is a big player here. I think he could put it up to Galopin Des Champs. He's got plenty in his favour. He goes well at Punchestown as well as everything else. He won the dual insurance race last year. He's run here 5 times. He's won 3 times and finished second twice. And one of those twos was in the John Durkin Chase when he ran fact to file to a half a length. That was a massive run. And the other one was actually at this meeting last year when he finished second behind the horse of Sean Doyle. So at a big price, he's got plenty in his favour. He's coming into the race fresher than most. He hasn't run since the King George. Jimmy Mangan seems to be happy with him. The vibes from the yard seem to be good. It's probably close to optimal conditions for him. 3 miles on 3 miles on a furlong on goodish ground, and he's still a lightly raced horse. So I can see Splans Tower running a big race. Look, the Monty Starr is a horse I've liked for quite some time, and Banbridge likewise. But on the day, the way that their kind of paths into the race, I can see Splans Tower being the one to put it up to Galopin Des Champs and possibly even beating it.
Yeah, good point from Donn on Splans Tower, Mark. Look, he reportedly didn't travel over very well to the King George, ran below himself, and has then subsequently, I suppose, travelled over to Aintree only to be taken out around an hour before the race. Is there a little bit of a concern that as much as he hasn't ran, any of that could have taken a little bit out of him?
You wouldn't say it's ideal, but there's a lot difference between having a run, what that takes out of a horse, and travelling. So I think the freshness angle is good, and if you're not much taking a run out of horses, what it's left a mark on. Galopin Des Champs is last 4 appearances at Punchestown. He's been beaten. Willie Mullins with Album Photo, another Gold Cup winner, dual Gold Cup winner. He was not for 3 in Punchestown Gold Cups. It's like when Willie is preparing on the path for a Gold Cup, you'd imagine that is when you're expecting maximum effort. And this horse was flat on the day. And just don't let me be the fella that's standing here knocking a horse of greatness stature of Galopin Des Champs, because it will come back to bite you if you are overly dogmatic in that sense. But you're just, strictly speaking, this has not been the place where you've seen the best of him. And you're coming against a rival in Splans Tower who it feels like if there's ever an opportunity for him to turn the tables on him, I think it's going to be here. At the end of the season, catch him cold, especially the nature of Galopin Des Champs' performance in the Gold Cup, where Paul Town didn't seem to think that he was taking him early. That he got lit up at one point in the race and gave him a feel, but was never really the Galopin Des Champs he felt that he had experienced in the previous Gold Cups. It sounds like reading between the lines. So in that case, you come in with a fresh horse who is proven stayer. I know ground-wise took him out at Aintree, but I never totally concerned. I know he handles softer stuff, but I think this is going to be fine for him. And I will lean into that angle with him. And the run even in the John Durkin earlier in the year, like where he's butting heads with Factifile, nearly beats him faster slow and Galopin behind him, albeit Galopin was in a place where he's going to improve from, I suppose. My one fear, I suppose, in being in the Flans Tower camp is exactly as you've outlined from the very start, Andrew, the pace scenario. Galopin Des Champs is funny. When he won his Irish Gold Cup, I think Willie Mullins might have made a reference to, he did it the hard way, it looked to be going a great gallop. But actually, when you dial it back, it wasn't, there was speed, he settled and he jumped and he did everything right. If you give him free rein and he builds up that confidence, he is relentless. So I would hope that maybe Monty Starr will go forward and keep him there. And you never know, maybe he might just travel with the same fluency as he did before. Willie Mullins even mentioned cheek pieces. Apologies if I'm wrong on that, but after the Gold Cup, just where he didn't latch on with that same spark. So I'll take the freshness angle. And if I'm wrong, it would be one of the rare moments that I ever take on Galopin Des Champs. But can history tell you if there is a place to go and try, it's here.
We're not going to look at the other grade ones throughout the week because, we don't have the declarations yet, but we do have the 60-second selection section now. That's a bit of a tongue twister. However, this gives the opportunity for all the panelists to give their best bets of the 2 days of declared runners we have, and then potentially any of the other grade ones or handicaps throughout the week. I'm going to start off. I've got 2, starting off one in a handicap at Punchestown on Wednesday, the first race, the Adair Manor race. I'm going to take a chance on Hampsian for Tony Martin. Ran at Aintree the last day, got knocked over by 2 horses on the first turn under Maxine O'Sullivan, was never in the race as a result and just hacked away. But he's down to a mark of 117, back in Ireland, did win at the Cheltenham November meeting on good ground. I think the ground would be nice. I don't think it would be that good in terms of, I think there'll be plenty of watering throughout the week, so I think it'll be perfect for everyone. Hampsian is a better horse on that slightly nicer ground. James Smith takes the ride, who's a handy jockey to have in this type of race, and I think he'll go very well. And in one of the grade ones later on the week, I just think one of the more disrespected, very good grade 1 horses going around is Tiupo. And as much as maybe drying ground wouldn't be in his favour, I'd certainly prefer to take the 2-1 on him to run his same customary good race than Bob Ollinger to back up the performance in the Stayers Hurdle, which was excellent, but he's a tricky horse. And at the same stage, he does need to go and back that up. So I'm taking Tiupo. I just think plenty of the stuff that's been said about him recently, about he's not the same horse and age is catching up with him. He's only 8 and he hasn't ran a bad race in the last 3 or 4 years. So I can't really buy that. I think 2-1 is pretty fair. I still think he's the best horse in that division. Mark, you usually, there's heaps of races to get stuck into here. There's low grade handicaps, there's hunter chases, and there's top quality grade 1, heaps to get stuck into.
I promise we won't bring ourselves down to go for something in the Bishop's Court Cup or a Ladies' Cup now. We'll keep it a little bit higher grade. But I do like in the Red Mills Auction Series final on Wednesday. I think Gavin Cromwell's got a big chance there with Champagne Jury, and a horse who was second Honesty Policy, made Honesty Policy work really hard at Leopardstown. I think he might have been 4-9 the day he touched 6s in running. But he's a bumper winner who won quite well. But the angle here, I suppose, where he's not a winner over hurdles and he gets a £5 pull at the weights as a result. I don't think it's the deepest renewal of this, and Gavin won it last year back to normal, will have had a handle on what's required. So I do like Champagne Jury in that. And earlier on the card as well, I'm going to take a little chance in the Louis Fitzgerald hurdle on Cade Doughty bouncing back. I'm happy to see cheek pieces go on first time. Everything that could go wrong basically in the Ballymore did early. He was ridden, he wouldn't need everything to go right anyway in grade 1 company like that. But early, watch him at the first, he goes straight at the back of 2 stablemate, goes right at the next, got lit up, ran keen. It just didn't happen for him from early. So a smaller field environment like this, less competitive race, on ratings, I think he's a decent type of territory. I think he's better horse than 133 suggests. His horse was 10-1 for a Supreme Novices after beat Cocktail Divan in a Leopardstown Christmas Maiden hurdle. I think he's got a fair bit of quality about him. They've always liked him. And maybe it's just a confidence boosting opportunity for him. And he mightn't just be too short either. So on the Wednesday, we'll go with those 2, Champagne Jury in the Red Mills Auction Final, and we'll go Cade Doughty in the Louis Fitzgerald hurdle.
Donn, who do you fancy this week?
Yeah, I think Empire Pass is overpriced in the Dooley Insurance Group Champion Chase. Andrew, as we were mentioning earlier on, I think Ballyburn might be vulnerable. Lecky Watson, I think he does require, while he's won over the intermediate trip a couple of times, I think he's a staying horse and might not be ideally suited at a meeting at which he's been beaten in the last 2 years. Whereas Empire Pass comes in here on the back of a really good win at Aintree, where he won with a little bit in hand. He's stepping up in trip to 3 miles in a furlong. That's a bit of an unknown, but he did win the select hurdle at Sandown over 2 miles, 5.5 furlongs. He stays 2.5 miles well. I think he's got that back class that could see him travel really well into his race and be a big player. In the champion chase, look at the market has it between Factifal and Marine Nationale. I think Marine Nationale could emerge best in that private duel, but I think Solness is the overpriced horse in the race. I think there's every chance he can get into rhythm in front. This goodish ground at a sharp track should suit him well. And I think 10 or 12 to 1 is too big about him. And in the champion 4-year-olds hurdle on Saturday, I'm giving another chance to Hello Neighbour. I think he was pretty well beaten at Cheltenham in the end, but he travelled into his race really well. And I think maybe Punchestown will suit him a little bit better. He's got that class off the flat. And obviously he won the Spring Juvenile Hurdle and he won the Grade 2 Hurdle at Leopardstown over Christmas. And I think the better ground will help him. I think as well the sharper track will help him. And I think taking on other horses from the Triumph Hurdle who finish in front of him, he might be a little bit of a price on Saturday.
Dan, I don't want to steep big pressure on you, but you've backed an awful lot of big priced winners on this show throughout the year. It's the last big jumps meeting of the season. We demand more.
And I will try, but I mean, I had 3 noted down, 2 for Wednesday, and neither were declared. So they were off to a hot start there. So we're down to 1 who is due to run on the Thursday. I can't imagine why he wouldn't run. It seems a logical target. And it's only right we get a British Raider in there. And the trainers who do come over tend to have a good record, particularly in the handicaps. And Gabriel's Getaway for Antina Honeyball, I think, is really interesting in the 2-mile handicap chase. Trainer who targets this meeting quite well. He's had a winner at 3 of the last 4 festivals, including in this race back in 2021 with Solly Doc. Very lightly raced 8-year-old is Gabriel's Getaway. Bolted up in a good handicap just over a year ago for Mark 122. That was a classic kind of 2-mile handicap chase in Britain. You had the likes of Calico, Ballistic, Nelson, etc. All the kind of stalwarts of that division there. And he bolted up, £5 out of the handicap, held up, won really stylishly. Big eye catcher on his return, only run 1 since, and that was just over a month ago off a 400-day break at Doncaster. Drifted like a barge in the bedding, but tanked into the race, just tired late on. Classic kind of run that says that'll bring him forward a lot. He only runs off 124 here, so only £2 higher than when he hacked up at Doncaster just 2 starts ago. Strongly run race will suit him. He's a hold-up horse who likes good ground. I think he's been aimed at this race for some way out, and I think he'll have a massive chance should he go there.
Dan getting a British runner in the Punchestown Festival. Some things
Rude not
are just inevitable. Thanks to the
Wave
gents
the flag
for joining me for the Punchestown Festival preview. Hope you have enjoyed it. If you have done, please go and like and subscribe to the channel down below. Make sure to look at all those Boyle Sports offers mentioned throughout the program as well in the link in the description below, and of course on the QR code on the screen at the start as well. Really hope you've had a very good jump season. We'll be back very soon, but the Punchestown Festival is always a fantastic way to finish off the year, and we hope you find plenty of winners. We'll see you again very soon.
Boyle Sports. Don't just bet. Choose wisely.